Hi, welcome to the International Insurance Society's Executive Insights Program. I'm Chunka Moy. I'm a futurist and innovation advisor to the IIS. I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. So, insurance and risk management executives across the globe constantly tell us that innovation is the #1 issue on their executive agendas. So, in responding to that priority, what we're focused on today is digitalization and infrastructure innovation, two critical elements of that innovation agenda. And before I ask today's panelists to introduce themselves, I want to take this opportunity to mention that if you find value in these programs, please visit the IIS website and consider registering for our virtual Global Insurance Forum in September. So to start, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves. Donald, can we start with you?
Sure, thanks, Chunka. My name is Donald Corkin. I'm the Regional Vice President for Consumer Insurance for Chubb in the continental Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. I'm responsible for designing and executing insurance programs that are, to protect end customers' needs. We do this through a variety of methods, but primarily working with our producer partners, some of which are some of the biggest names in the industries that you would be familiar with.
Great, thanks. James?
Yeah, hi, Chunka. Thank you. James Maudsley. I am the digital strategy lead for insurance at Equinix, the global infrastructure provider.
And Victor?
Yeah, hey, my name is Victor Gallegos, and I am with AT&T. I'm a lead channel manager for the finance vertical here at AT&T, and I have responsibilities over our cybersecurity portfolio as well as the insurance sub-vertical, and helping all of our teams to evangelize those messages well and effectively.
Great, thanks. I think it's always interesting in these virtual times we've evolved to identify where physically we're coming in from. I am coming from a little town of Shelburne, Vermont. How about you, Donald?
I'm currently sitting in a room in Madrid in Spain.
Nice. James?
So I'm in London, Chunka. So, yeah, reinsurance home.
Right. And Victor?
I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. I mean, can you imagine 14 months ago us having this nice little webinar from these 4 points of the globe and having this discussion? So I'd like to organize our discussion into 3 parts. First, it's always nice to know what kind of future we want to achieve when we're talking about tools and technology to get there. So I want to start with the future that we're aiming for. And then working backwards from that future, I want to talk about some of the waypoints to achieving that. What are sort of the critical accomplishments we need to get to in order to achieve that future? And then finally, how do we start? I want to end with getting tactical and talking about sort of the most pressing issues in infrastructure transformation that we need to enable that future. And so let's just jump right into it. So Vladimir Lenin said that there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. And I think we've gone through about 60 weeks or so where many decades have happened, both positively and many, many negative kinds of things. And we've all been grappling with how to respond to the pandemic, both in our lives, in our own organizations, and in the lives of the customers that we serve. So I want to start with there and ask each of you to talk a little bit about, we all knew that digitization was happening. We all knew we had to accelerate the transformation, but how has the pandemic sort of changed your sense of the pace of change and the kinds of things you need to achieve in each of your businesses in order to respond to sort of the changes wrought by the pandemic? And I want to first start with you, Donald, and talk specifically about insurance and how your organization is responding, how you respond to your customers.
Yeah, it's the last 60 weeks. It seems like 260 weeks, but it's been a ride. But I think one of the important things is we've all been in this together. Every industry, every segment, every person, we've all had to deal with this at the same time. And I think it's been impressive how we've reacted to it. For me personally, I have a regional role, so which has a lot of travel in it, traveling to countries, meeting with teams, meeting with clients, existing clients, prospective clients. And I think we've found out through necessity that we can do that virtually. And I think that has been it has been a real accelerant, as you say, and it has been refreshing to know that we could do that. I think now, though, as vaccinations take hold and as we start thinking about returning to work, returning to meeting, returning to in-person, I see a shift. I don't know that business travel, as I knew it, as the world knew it, as the industry knew it, will ever return to the same levels. But I think it's going to be very interesting that those in-person meetings, particularly maybe with clients, when you're trying to do a deal, when you're trying to fix an issue, I think those meetings, when they're happening in face-to-face, will be even more meaningful than they have been in the last 15 to 16 months. So I think that's one important change that we'll see in the coming months towards the end of the year. And also, just conversations with your own team. Though some of those conversations are just better in person, they're more collaborative. I think one of the downsides that I've seen is that what used to take me, every call now seems to be a standard 30 minutes, when before I could resolve that in 2 to 3 minutes in a hallway in the office. So there's plus and minuses, and I think there'll be a new balance in the future.
Yeah. So this challenge of how we're all changing in terms of how we interact and also how we transact, how do we close transactions, how do we sort of do the nitty gritty of business. I mean, that has implications on our own organizations. We're grappling with that, and it has implications on the organizations that we work with and that we support. Perhaps maybe I'll turn it to Victor and James. Comment on, as you sort of look at your industries and how you serve the insurance industry writ large, how has that changed in terms of interaction and transaction affected, your role in supporting the insurance industry? James, perhaps we can start with you.
Sure, Chaka, thank you. I think that from our perspective, what we've seen happen is the shift from an industry that was primarily based on personal interaction, that interaction being perhaps face-to-face, as Donald referenced just now, perhaps via call centers, a more typical way in which many insurance customers encounter the insurance world. So what we were faced with last March was a situation where suddenly the industry had to adapt to a new world in which it couldn't get its employees into the place they had traditionally been. So we saw an extremely rapid adoption of sort of a collaboration tool, such as Zoom or WebEx or Teams, across the industry, which I think did serve to prove one thing, and that is that, as an insurer myself, I think I could potentially accuse the industry of never being the fastest to adopt new technology. But there was no question that in a moment of great stress on the industry, it had to move very quickly to adopting some of these new digital tools. For me, the question now is, what is the insurance industry going to do with these tools and more advanced tools that lie beyond them, having found that it can survive and can thrive using digital collaboration?
Yeah. Victor?
Yeah, that's a good thought, James. And, I think it's important to baseline in my own reflections. When I look at what happened through the pandemic, I kind of view it as an accelerant, right? So we see everyone was marching in the same direction already, but kind of at their own rate of pace. And then the pandemic happens, and now everybody's marching to the beat of the same drum, right? At the same cadence, which was really, really fast, to everyone's point. And I'll give you an example of why I feel like we were all marching in the same direction already, right? 15 years ago, I'm a college student, and I'm going to pay my electric bill in the county electric office. And now that would just seem like something totally foreign, or even 10 years ago, that would seem like something totally foreign. So this this march towards a truly digital future was already underway. But what COVID did was just apply, probably the fastest accelerant that we'll ever see in our lifetimes, right? So, where are some of the other areas that we're seeing the accelerant really coming to the top of the service in the insurance industry? I would say there's two real easy areas to identify, and one is in networking, and the other one is in cybersecurity, right? So as we go from these environments where we had these networks that were all centralized, we did see some remote work, we did see mobile workers, but now though all of those networks that are being managed are now 100-fold, and the endpoints and where they reside are now 100-fold on where they were before. So with that being said, what we're seeing and what we're doing at AT&T to help our insurer customers is to help them with the narratives, right? What is your narrative when it comes to these two main things? What does the future of work, what does the future of work look like for your organization? And B, how are you securing and ensuring the digital experience, both for your employees and your end users? So, yeah, go ahead, Chunka.
Oh, I was going to say those are great points and clearly really critical for the industry. And I love this sort of metaphor. We went from sort of a leisurely stroll at different paces to a forced march at the same cadence, right? Yeah. Because we're all responding to one thing. There was something that you said, James, earlier in our sort of email exchange that I wanted sort of to hit on, because sometimes understanding future, you understand better by thinking about what might have happened instead that didn't quite work out. And you said something in the message that said, perhaps unexpectedly to some, insurance survived.
Yeah.
And what was the fear? I mean, last February, March for all of you, what was the thing you most feared in terms of being able to make that march?
I think the fear was that, as an insurer facing down the technical end of things, I understand that a lot of people think insurance is simply quite backward. But the reality is that there has been, I suppose, a catalogue of issues, perhaps, in the extension of IT over insurance, where the sort of the product or the need has not actually been quite joined together properly. Now, as to why that has happened, there is fault on all sides. In insurers in not really understanding what they were asking for in terms of IT, in often not supplying what it said it could. But that comment really came from the fact that I think if you looked at the industry from a pure IT perspective, you might think that its ability to adapt, its ability to change is quite limited. I've seen more change in the last 25 years in insurance as an industry than most will ever go through. And insurance as a business routinely accommodates it. It's merely that I suppose the external forces need to grow to a particular point where they become of sufficient urgency that they simply have to be dealt with. That's what we faced in March last year. Yeah, and the insurance industry did what it always does. It rose to the occasion. I'd like to see it go much, much further. And of course, we're going to come on to that. But it rose to the occasion and delivered the survival factor that it needed.
Right, because to some extent, Donna, I'd love for you to comment on this. The insurance industry responds to the marketplace. And customers themselves were sort of ambivalent. How do they want to transact? How do they want to interact? Some were digital forward, and some said, look, you want to do business, come visit me, right? And let's talk about it. I need to trust you, and the elements of trust were different. And now the rest of the world is learning that they can interact that way, and you have to respond. So whoever leads and who follows, it's always a chicken egg kind of thing, but I think the scenario has changed. Would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's amazing how we all adapted contactless so quickly. You know, I'm a new adopter of a smartwatch. I barely have to put my wrist up to the machine now anymore. And the banking industry changed. All of a sudden, everything became contactless. Even though it was partially there, it's now fully there. And people were forced to adapt, and now they like it because they didn't have to touch anything, because in the pandemic, maybe you don't want to touch anything. So it's amazing the pace of change. I think how that relates in my world or in the consumer insurance world is contactless interaction. I'm giving the example of a payment solution here, maybe through your smartwatch, but really it's how can I get the insurance that I need through an avenue that I'm familiar with and have it delivered to me without really necessarily touching anything. Having it delivered through email, end-to-end posting, having self-service portals, the whole contactless experience is, I think, more and more important as we go forward. And I think, again, the pandemic has just accelerated all of those things in that regard.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's shift a little bit.
I'd like to chime in on that if I can. So I'll offer myself up on the chopping block here as, you know, the millennial consumer, right? So we all know how difficult.
You have the darkest hair on the screen.
So, you know, we know that, you know, millennials are a huge generation, right? The market has to focus on this. And I'll use some of my own experiences just to kind of elaborate on what Donald was talking about here, right? How do we provide the appropriate experiences? And I'll provide an example. You know, when it came to telematics in insurance, right? And when it came to, do I really want my phone being tracked to lower my insurance rate? I was strongly opposed to that. And why is that, right? It's because there's the fear of it interfering with my experience, right? And so, you know, what I think that we've seen through this big digital push is that we're all becoming a little bit more receptive to what the advantages of something digital can mean for us. So, for example, me personally, I've accepted the fact that I now have smart sensors in my home to detect water leaks because it helps my insurer with the information needed to set a rate that's actually advantageous to me. So my mentality has totally 180'd, and I've come to the position of, you know what, this is good for me. I want this as a consumer. And, you know, I don't know that would have been my opinion, say, 2 years ago.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I think we can sort of say that we went from many of us wanting contact to none of us wanting contact for a certain amount of time there. And now we can sort of posit a future where contactless, completely digital service is not only desirable for some segment of our customer base, but necessary. And I think inevitably we're going to step back from that. I mean, we're not going to stay there, but some people will stay there. And we've accelerated the point in the future where all of our organizations need to provide a completely digital experience and have the supporting infrastructure to support that, and then let the customers, you know, sort out, you know, how quickly they want to move themselves.
That's
but some are going to move there faster. So let's talk about what we need to do in order to get there. So let's step back to the sort of the medium point. What are sort of the core capabilities that we have to sort of accelerate development of in order to build that future? And, you know, you've all mentioned a bunch of those already, but let me just step back and give you a chance to reflect on that and comment. Let's start with you, James.
Sure. So I think for me, this sort of begins, and actually it's a very interesting point Victor just made. And I'd say actually to add one thing to what he said, and that is that I think insurance has a slightly bigger issue right now than the user experience with millennials particularly. It's about justifying the existence of insurance. And I have some personal experiences of my children that I'd be glad to go into offline. But you know, but the whole thing about what is it for? Why is it there? And to me, that sort of brings me on to really my thoughts about this, which are that What we have to do within the industry is put ourselves in a position where we can use technology to bolster the position of insurance, to prove the value of it. I think the IIS have got a great headline thought for this year: powering recovery. Okay, and to me, this really does come down to the number. Insurance needs to be there at the front end, showing how it can drive recovery, how it can support businesses of all types and people of all types as they seek to recover from what's happened recently. This is going to involve the employment of new technology. This is going to involve analytics. It's going to involve a combination of a host of different types of data, be it historic data that insurers have in such enormous quantity, be it generated data that we're now seeing. Again, Victor mentioned leak detectors and so on. These sort of IoT devices that are driving information through into the industry. Be it information derived from the public arena, to sort of test things and judge things, and really to start bringing forward products that are personalized, that really relate to an individual, where an individual can see very clearly the types of cover they're getting, the sort of benefits that it has to them, in return for which, of course, they give up a premium. And to me, this is absolutely fundamental. This involves making sure that we can connect, we can interconnect all these disparate sources of data in a usable fashion that enable underwriters ultimately and advisors, intermediaries between them and the clients, to make these decisions and deliver a valuable risk protection providing product to move us forward.
Right. So Donald, the kind of capabilities, kind of information that Victor and James have talked about certainly can help create new products, better cover risk. But at the same time, the use of that information, especially in Europe, which is sort of at the forefront of trying to balance this tension between innovation and privacy and security. How do you balance that tension? How do you think about taking advantage of these kinds of capabilities to innovate from a product standpoint?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic of conversation. I think it speaks to how insurance can be the power of good and can really power some of the rebound here. These examples are great. And I think regulators want to protect people's privacy and for all the right reasons. But I think we have to showcase ways on how it can be a real positive effect in people's lives. The example of telematics, I love that one, Victor. For the longest time, it was the fear of the unknown. It's invasive. It doesn't make sense. But the reality is, for the good drivers, for the people who drive well, it really substantially lowers your insurance cost. But not only that, the power of good is that it promotes good driving. It promotes defensive driving, slower on corners, slower acceleration, all the good things that save accidents and road deaths. So there's a real power of good there. And the same like the sensors example. This was a few years ago, was the reserve of high net worth individuals who could afford these on top of their insurance. But the reality is, as James said, the Internet of Things, patents expiring, they're now widely available to most and every household. And with the Internet of Things, we can really prevent a lot of these floods, fires in the homes taking place, which again lowers the cost of insurance, and it promotes an industry being very proactive in terms of how it evolves with their customers' needs. And the reality is, these things might be a cost, but they're really an investment. Even if you have the most insurance and the top levels of insurance, you still don't want a fire in your home. You still don't want a flooded basement, because it's still a nightmare, even if your insurance carrier covers everything for you. So I think we're getting back into really being customer centric. And I think as an industry, we have to work with the regulators to suggest that consent, GDPR, getting the necessary consent, following the regulations is not so that we can bombard them with nuisance phone calls from a call center. It's really about getting to know the customer, getting to know the insurance needs of those customers, and ultimately driving down cost, which is in everyone's best interest. I'm a consumer. I need protection in my life. I too have costs of insurance, and I think if it was more easily available to me, tailored to me in a price that I think is more affordable, why wouldn't I want that?
Yeah, yeah. And of course, a key part of that, I mean, there's the privacy issue, which we have to manage from both a business practice and a regulatory standpoint. But the other part of consumers trusting those new products is security, cybersecurity. And as the infrastructure expands, as the edges expand, the weak points grow. I wonder, Victor and James, as infrastructure providers to these kind of capabilities, if you could comment on the state of cybersecurity and where you see it going, and how you see it playing into this kind of product innovation we're talking about here. Victor, could we start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the importance of cybersecurity can't be overstated, right? So it started as an IT problem, and it's now a business imperative. It's to the point that we're seeing consumers having the need to protect themselves, right? The measures that I've taken in my own home to make sure that my own network truly is secure. And so, when I look at it from an industry perspective, and we see the push to a truly digital environment, this is ultimately putting an emphasis on the cloud, right? Everything is moving to the cloud in some form or fashion. And security is as well, because whether it's an application, whether it's a user permission level. So for example, right, I am a channel manager. Do I need access to my firm's financial records, right? Probably not. So being able to set user-defined permissions at an application level, regardless of environment. We see this layering come into play that isn't just your traditional firewall from a cybersecurity perspective. It is now a much more of securing all of the different back doors and windows that exist, as well as ensuring that the experience remains, right? Because back to the point of, is this interfering with my experience? If we can truly secure an environment in a way that is frictionless, then that is something that, the power of good, that is something that is ultimately good, and something that I think we can all agree that we need. Cybersecurity is such a bear, that not anyone can talk about it. And it's actually a challenge just to talk about it in plain English, right? But I think that what we'll see is just, a move to make sure that all of these different cloud access points are secure, and that we have visibility as organizations to be able to seamlessly and frictionlessly view what's going on in our environments.
Yeah. And James, of course, you can't have digital strategy in insurance without digital security in insurance. Speak to how you're approaching that issue.
Oh, look, that's absolutely right, and obviously I absolutely agree 100% with everything Victor's just said. And I thought Donald's point about sort of, in a sense, beginning to move the industry back to being the trusted advisor that perhaps it was in the past, perhaps shifting the industry to being able to, unless it's become a little too far-fetched about it, prevent things happening in the first place. Now, I appreciate with a hurricane that doesn't work, but for example, with a pump that you might have, I don't know, history on or data on, maybe it is possible to actually change it before it fails. But absolutely, the whole security thing is vital. Insurance is nothing if not based on trust. And to us at Equinix, that we feel that is something that is best supported through and I apologize for using the word again, but it's this concept of privately interconnecting these differing areas of compute, these differing areas of storage, these differing areas of data transmission. All of those, if you can begin to connect those together in a secure, private fashion, suddenly you're faced with the potential for a platform, the potential for a network, the potential for an ecosystem, if you like, that can really begin to advance this all together.
Yeah. So, but the beauty of insurance is that every risk is an opportunity. Every risk, managing risk is a business opportunity. And historically, the insurance industry gets a lot of credit as the economic player, economic agent that motivated improvements in building codes and electrical safety, building the underwriter's laboratory, things of that sort. Donald, when you think about security and the risk that your customers have from that standpoint, do you think about products that sort of helped industry move towards greater cybersecurity? Is that something that's on the horizon from a consumer standpoint?
I think we have it covered in a number of angles, and I think family cyber is something that is more and more pertinent. It started with identity theft, I guess, a decade ago, but I think it has evolved as social media and the avenues in which our children and our family interact in our home, the devices in our home. I think it's becoming more and more pertinent, and I think, this notion of family cyber is very important. But it also is kind of supplementary to what I think Victor and James said is happening at an organizational level. I see it in my own organization: red data, yellow data, green data. These things are very, very important. It's taken very, very seriously at the corporation level, which is good and comforting. But I think then, there's this who is evolving faster? The protectors or the hackers? And right. It's not something that's going away anytime soon.
Yeah, certainly an arms race, as it were. Let's talk a little, maybe spend a couple of minutes. We talked about analytics, we talked about security. What are, and maybe this is a question to Victor and James, as you think from a technical standpoint across industry, what are other sort of big driving technological changes that will contribute to the kind of digital future we're talking about? I know, for example, many people are focused on machine learning, artificial intelligence, all these sort of large scale technology drivers of progress. What's jumping to the fore in your work of the insurance industry?
Yeah, so I can kick that answer off. So, we see, just to reemphasize the decentralization of everything. While we're in the thick of that transformation, I think that it will also continue. So especially as the return to work and the future work continues to unfold. So I'll give a few examples, right? So as we see, as Donald mentioned, that there's still going to be a remote work presence even after things return to normal. We went from a position of, at the onset of the pandemic, of we need to get everything up and running, to now we're in a position of how do we optimize this and make it the most efficient that it can be? And, what does that look like? Is a bandwidth connection into a home, a high-speed bandwidth connection into a home enough? Right? Maybe it is for some job titles, but maybe it's not for others, right? And we're starting to see some of those innovative solutions coming into play. Specifically for the insurance industry, right? What I see this continuing to unfold in, if I'm hypothesizing, right, is the consumer experience is going to continue to be of utmost importance, from, being able to just do everything from an end user perspective, right? The first notification of loss, submitting a claim digitally, all of those things, we're starting to see them come into fruition now. They'll only be more and more adopted, right? So from me as a consumer, right, and some of the trends that we see, 80% of all mobile minutes being spent in applications, right? That is extremely important to know when you're planning for the market, right? How important is that public interface from an application perspective? Another personal example is, my wife was in the big box store parking lot in a downpour with our 2-year-old and our 4-year-old, and came out to a flat tire. And she came home raving about how she was able to go into this insurance app and pinpoint on a map and have someone not only show up to the right place, but show up to the right parking spot, right? And how easy that was for her when managing, frozen foods that are getting, that are thawing out, entertaining children, all of those things. It just made it so easy. And so, that's just to the point of the power of good. And I think another way that we're going to see this, and I'm really excited about this one, is when it comes to innovation. I think that we're going to start seeing how this crosses industry boundaries, where we're going to see the need for insurers to partner with other industries in ways that maybe we haven't seen before. I'm just hypothesizing here, but when we talk about the telematics, right? We've seen it go from the onboard car dongle to the opting into an application on the smartphone, right? Is that going to shift back to the car as built-in capabilities from a manufacturing perspective improve, as telematics improve, right? That's just one example. And the IoT of things is the shining example, the overall example of where I think we'll see industries begin working together to drive innovation in ways that we haven't seen before.
Right, those are great examples. James?
So, yeah, I mean, obviously, I think everything Victor said is absolutely valid, 100%. The concept of an ecosystem, a platform, a system by which insurers partner with non-insurance businesses to enrich their product to make it better, absolutely spot on. I think there are two other things here. The first is that there's kind of a basic level of technology that delivers a lot relatively easily. Victor's example of his wife and the flat tire is perfect. All you need there is a bit of geospatial mapping, the destination, the location, the phone, and you've got it. Simple, but my God, does that deliver a lot to the customer. Absolutely fantastic. The second thing is that there's this whole piece around what can artificial intelligence, machine learning deliver to the insurance industry. And from what the work I've done, the learnings that I've had, I think what the industry needs to do is remember that AI is not there to take over from underwriters. AI is not going to replace Chubb. What it can do, though, is it can bolster the capabilities of underwriters. It can it can highlight anomalies. It can put them to work in areas where they can best serve their customer and their company. And all of this now can be done through partnerships. I've said it a few times before, but the truth of the matter is, do I believe that, for example, a particular insurance company should be delivering AI solutions? No, I don't, because there are people out there who can do it better. There are people out there that can deliver it to almost as a package solution through partnering, through this use of platforms, of connecting to each other digitally to exchange information. And I think this is going to be a hugely significant thrust forward for the industry.
That's a great point as well. Those are excellent examples.
I like that, James.
Yeah. Please go ahead, Donald.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I like that, James. I think sometimes we confuse the word digitization with automation. For insurance, I think you're right. This big data, the AI, the machine learning, that will help the insurance industry get better. It won't necessarily, or it's not designed really to remove people. At the end of the day, we might come up with something that has speech analytics that helps us triage a claim, or machine learning that helps us handle claims better. But at the end of the day, there's a claims adjuster talking to a consumer who has had an accident that is covered and they need direction. And a robot most likely won't do that. So I think you're right. I think it will help us become a better industry to serve our customers better, 100%.
Yep.
That's right. So let's turn our attention one more time and let's get really tactical. I mean, we've talked about a really sort of optimistic future of capability and products and supporting infrastructure, some of the key elements we need to sort of master in order to get there. So let's talk about sort of your current agenda. What are the most pressing issues, the most pressing gaps that you're working on, both either as an organization or to serve your clients? So Donald, what are you asking for from your IT folks today?
I mean, I think, yeah, the tactics are so fluid. I think the industry is evolving a lot, and within that space, the consumer insurance space is evolving, is super dynamic. And then the digital element of that, the most dynamic of the dynamic parts of the industry. So I think you have to be very fluid with your tactics and be able to be agile. You know, what I see, to answer your question, what I see is a lot of clients who want to do everything themselves. I also see a lot of clients that want to do nothing and want you to produce everything, the platform, the interaction, the know-how, the people, everything. And of course, then there's a whole chunk in the middle. And sometimes the people who think they want to do everything themselves end up doing very little, because as they begin to learn more about the insurance program and what we're trying to put together, it changes. So yeah, the tactics in this area right now, today, and for the foreseeable future are going to have to be very fluid, very agile, and rolling with the technology changes, consumer research, the patterns that we see in behavior. That level of customer centricity has to be matched up, and I think it's a huge challenge for the technology space as well as the insurance industry itself.
Right, because in order to be agile, you have to be that much more masterful of a whole range of different capabilities, and have workflows and processes to allow for that level of innovation and response, right? Sense and response to customers. So, Victor, James, you know, that's the charge. Agility to master everything. That's not asking for much from insurers, is it? Well, what do you see as the most pressing issues in terms of what you're developing to serve the industry?
Yeah, I think Donald nailed it. You know, going back to one of my opening comments of, you know, what's the narrative that the organizations that we support are trying to form, right? And, you know, one of the things that I love seeing is alignment. And that's why I love Donald's answer so much. It's perfectly aligned to what we're seeing from our customers that we serve, right? The insurers that we serve. It's how do we provide the insurers we serve with the ability to be seamless and agile? Donald, you described me to a T as a consumer. I want to be able to do everything on my own as quickly as possible until I need help. And when I need help, I expect that help immediately. And you know, when that just
immediately
and when we look at, you know, the future of work and ensuring the digital experience, that agility to be able to go from, you know, that public facing interface to now the human element becomes extremely important, right? So the modernization that's happening from an omni-channel perspective, right? The interactions that we're capable of having, whether it's chat, whether it's a remote session, or whether it's calling in, right? Just being able to unify all of those. And then as well as that, you know, another component that Donald mentioned is, you know, identity and how important that really is, and how we need to be able to provide. I think that this is kind of meshing together James and Donald's points, but, you know, insurers need to be able to provide that trust to their consumer base that we're looking for, right? As a consumer, I'm looking to know that all of my information is secure. That is important to me. And so from a provider's perspective, how do we secure all of those environments while ensuring the seamless experience? And the word agility couldn't be more perfect.
Right. So there you have it, James. The customer's perspective is that they want to do everything themselves until they run into trouble, and then they want you to respond completely and immediately after that part, but not beforehand. So, I think given our time, you actually get the last word, right? So,
marvelous.
What's the most pressing thing, right, that insurers need to do, and that you're responding to?
I think firstly, Chunka, the thing is to recognize that Victor was completely wrong about what he just said, because he doesn't need help immediately. He needs help about a millisecond before he realized he needed it.
That's right. Yeah.
Moving forward. But seriously, everything the guy has said is absolutely true, and I think that there are three thoughts I'd like to leave you with, and that is that, like so much of enterprise has done, at least in our experience dealing with countless enterprises, as of course Victor does at AT&T. I think there are three critical areas of IT infrastructure that we would like to as it were, to open insurers' eyes to, and they are the concepts of core, the concept of digital edge, and the concept of exchange. And briefly, what that means is that, firstly, at the digital edge is wherever it is. It is wherever it's wherever Victor finds himself requiring help immediately. It's Victor's wife in her car with her flat tire. It's whatever it is. And so data is being produced there, data is being analyzed there, data is being manipulated there. The second thing is the core, the traditional home office, if you like, where insurance companies manipulate data on a grand scale to produce analytics. And finally, this concept of exchange. And the point about exchange is that is where all these things come together. That is where the ecosystem becomes real. That is where the platform becomes live. If you run things on that, if you move towards that basis and you use highly capable, very fast, very secure connectivity to join these things together, you really do deliver ultimately a service that will make you agile to your customers, it will make you responsive to their needs, and actually deliver the kinds of protection that people actually need going forward, not the kinds of protection the insurance industry has historically felt people require, but the actual ones they really want moving forward, which, guys, they will pay for.
Absolutely. That's a great point to leave this conversation at. I mean, digitization and the infrastructure to support that. There's no doubt that there's this massive requirement coming from our customers, and that also creates massive opportunity for the industry. So on behalf of the IIS, I want to thank the panelists for joining this conversation. And this is sort of one point in a continuing conversation. So we hope certainly that the viewers will come back, visit the IIS website, and sign up for the virtual forum in September. Great. Thank you.